Hello and welcome to First Chapter Fridays with Miss Valine, your media specialist here at, well, not CCMS, but could be CCMS if I was there, but I'm not right now. I am enjoying the rain outside in beautiful Oregon, and I have a ton of new books that I brought with me to read them before you get a hold of them. Get them on the catalog so you can check them out. Today's book is from one of those brand new books. It is titled You Go First by Erin Kelly. Erin Kelly is a Newbery Award winner for Hello Universe, which we also have in our media center. This book is about two middle schoolers who are feeling very isolated. I bet you can kind of relate to that. They're also feeling very unsure about themselves and don't feel like they quite fit in anywhere. And that isolation just makes things even worse. So I think it is a book that maybe a lot of you can relate to. I know that when I was in middle school, I would have totally related to this book as well. So You Go First by Erin Entrada. I know I've told you before how much I love books that are written in two different points of view. This is this book. We have Ben and we have Charlotte, the two main characters of the story. And each chapter flips between the two characters. So you hear Charlotte's voice and then you hear Ben's voice, so that you get, a sense of where these two very totally different students are coming from. One lives in Louisiana, the other one lives in Philadelphia. So they live thousands of miles from one another, completely different lives. But they share so much. They share so much. One of those is the love for playing online Scrabble. So let's take a look. First Chapter Friday. You go first. Part 1 is Monday. Chapter 1 is Girl with a Soda. Rabbit hole. Rabbits sometimes dig holes for protection. Once the hole is there, they can crawl inside and hide. Other rabbit holes may lead to vast underground mazes known as warrens, which is where the rabbit lives. Warren also describes a densely populated building. 12-year-old Charlotte Lockard balanced an unopened Dr. Pepper upright on her hand and thought, "This is what it feels like to hold my dad's heart." She'd read online that the heart weighs about 12 ounces, same as the Dr. Pepper. She was firmly rooted in the glow of a cruiser hospital vending machine until a woman with tired eyes and gray hair said, "Excuse me." Charlotte mumbled a half apology and hurried back to the waiting room, where her mother sniffed into a tissue and blamed it on allergies. Normally, her mother wouldn't let her drink Dr. Pepper, but these weren't normal times. 2 hours earlier, Charlotte had been in life science. A knock landed on Mrs. Schneider's door as Charlotte chewed at the end of her pencil and stared at the discussion topic on her paper. There are about 1,500 species of starfish. They live primarily in the intertidal zone, which is also known as the littoral zone or foreshore. Organisms along the intertidal zone are uniquely adept at surviving in harsh environments. Describe some characteristics of the intertidal zone versus the peritidal zone. Charlotte had just finished writing. The intertidal zone is the area between the tides, i.e., it exists above water at low tides and below water at high tides, which differs from the peritidal zone, a wider area that extends from above the highest tide level to below the lowest tide level. When Mrs. Schneider called her name, Miss Schneider, tall and lean, stood next to Miss Katari, the school counselor, who was short and round. They were opposites side by side, compare and contrast, and they were both frowning. Did something happen to my dad? Charlotte asked, without getting up from her seat. She felt the other kid's eye on her. That's when she decided she would probably stand up and follow Miss Katari out the door, where she discovered the answer was yes. He'd had a heart attack and crashed the car in front of Old Navy before being brought to Crozer Hospital for emergency surgery. And now she was there, drinking forbidden soda and watching her mother read Us Weekly, which is something her mother would never read in real life. But Charlotte knew she wasn't really reading it because her reading glasses were perched on her head. Eyesight is the first thing to go after 50, her mother always said, and Charlotte knew why. The lens of the eye hardens, and over time, it makes it difficult to focus, something Charlotte learned after she crawled into a rabbit hole. That's what her dad called it when she got swept up researching useless information online. You've crawled into your rabbit hole again, he would say. Charlotte sipped her soda. She stared at the waiting room sign and thought, if you unshuffled and rearranged some of the letters of waiting room, you get migration, which is kind of the opposite of waiting. It was a good word scramble, all things considered, because her father loved birds. He'd joined a birding club after he retired from teaching art history at Swarthmore College last year. Something he veered off this Sometimes he veered off the sidewalk when he walked because he was too busy looking up. If there weren't any birds, he'd look at leaves instead. Look at the shape of this one, Charlotte, he would say, a leaf in the center of his palm. See how the lines branch off here? And see the fringe on the outside? Beautiful, isn't it? Art. And Charlotte would nod because she just wanted to get wherever they were going. Flip, flip, flip. The sound of her mother with the magazine crawled under Charlotte's skin. Charlotte's mother was a statistician and usually hovered over information like a hawk, but she turned the pages so quickly that it was obvious she wasn't reading a word. She just needed to be busy. Did you tell Bridget what happened? Her mother asked. Yes. Bridget was her best friend. Of course she had told her. Charlotte slid down into the chair and stared at the discarded straw on the floor. How long until Dad gets out of surgery? Charlotte asked. I don't know. Her mother glanced at the clock on the wall. Soon, I hope. Charlotte was prepared for anything. Last year, when her father got a stent in his heart, she went down a rabbit hole and spent 2 hours watching open heart surgeries and transplants. She knew what was happening with her dad at this very moment. He was hooked up to a heart-lung bypass machine. They'd probably already stopped his heart so they could operate on it. Charlotte finished her soda in big gulps and went to the bathroom. Anything to get away from the flip, flip, flip. Did you wash your hands? Her mother asked when she got back. There are a million germs floating around hospitals. Charlotte didn't answer. She secretly rolled her eyes instead, and as if she didn't know about Acinetobacter baumannii. I didn't know how to say that. I've never seen that word before. A bacteria that teemed on bed rails, supply carts, and floors, as if she didn't know that this species of bacteria could survive for long periods of time and was found in nearly half of all hospital rooms, as if she wasn't aware that it was an opportunistic parasite that preyed on people with weakened immune systems. Will we be able to see him when he's in recovery? Charlotte asked. If all goes well, the doctor said you have to be at least 12 to visit recovery and ICU. You lucked out. Charlotte looked for the straw again, but it wasn't there. Did someone pick it up while she was in the restroom? She focused on the carpet instead. Do you know starfish have hearts too? She said. A human heart can beat 100 times a minute, but a starfish's heart only beats 6 times. Her mother paused. I didn't know that. About starfish, I mean. They're actually called sea stars, but everyone calls them starfish. We're dissecting one in life sciences soon. Flip, flip, flip. The carpet had hexagon patterns. The sum of the interior angles of all the hexagons was 720 degrees. Charlotte stared and stared at those interior angles until they barely existed anymore. That is the first chapter of You Go First by Erin Kelly. In the second chapter, you get to meet Ben, the other main character of the story, who lives almost all the way across the United States from Charlotte. Life According to Ben, Part 1. 11-year-old Benjamin Boxer had played approximately 400 games of online Scrabble since getting his new phone 3 months earlier. He'd been dedicated to a single feverish goal: to unseat his nemesis, a 12-year-old girl named Lottie Locke, and become number 1 on the leaderboard. He and Lottie had met on an online Scrabble message board, specifically sanctioned for elementary school students, but Lottie lost access when she started middle school. So they decided to battle one another to experience direct combat. They only played each other, but their scores were tallied with all the other Scrabble players, and thus far, Lottie had nudged him out. It was a friendly rivalry. They exchanged dozens of texts back and forth over the summer. You call that a play? Sorry, not sorry, about your devastating loss. Prepare to suffer my vernacular wrath, etc., etc., etc. But they also complemented worthy performances, like the time Ben played A&T and Lottie won that with Anthem. So they weren't exactly Superman and Lex Luthor, but still, Ben considered it healthy to have a nemesis, and he was determined to overtake first position with his own username, Ben Boot, in honor of his fellow Ravenclaw Terry Boot, an obscure member of the Dumbledore Army. Then, less than 30 minutes after the end of a school day in September, the unthinkable happened. Actually, it was totally thinkable, but Ben still hadn't expected it. At least not yet. Somehow, Lottie Locke had slipped on her game, and Ben Boot had advanced to first place with the word Vine, of all things. Ben immediately took a screenshot and darted out of his room, down the hall, and into the kitchen so he could share the joyous news with his parents, who had, by a stroke of seemingly good fortune, taken the day off. They were certain to lift him on their shoulders and carry him throughout the neighborhood, in spirit anyway. Lucky for him, his mom and dad were already standing side by side, which was kind of weird because they were talking in whispers, and his mom was drinking coffee, even though it was 3 in the afternoon, and their faces were very serious until he heard him come in. That's when their serious faces morphed into something far more concerning: fake nonchalance. Ben, his mother said, like he was a long lost relative who had just appeared for a friendly dinner. Son, his dad said. Things were definitely weird. We were just about to call you in, said his mother. His father nodded. We have an announcement. Ben looked from his mother to his father, then sat down at the kitchen island and laid his phone face down. The joyous news would have to wait, apparently. The expression on his parents' face was unfamiliar, so the announcement was clearly significant. There was only one thing it could be, in Ben's mind. The 3 of them were escaping the dregs of Louisiana and moving to Michigan. That's where Mr. and Mrs. Boxer had gone to college, and they always talked about going back. Each time this subject came up, Ben imagined himself building snowmen, strutting down the halls of a new school, watching the leaves change color on the trees, hiking up mountains, even. He was desperate to leave this hot, sticky swamp of South Louisiana and live in the magical wonderland of Ann Arbor, Michigan. He'd never been to Ann Arbor or Michigan, but anything was better than Lancaster, Louisiana. Ben sat on his hands so he wouldn't wiggle out of his seat. He was suddenly antsy. The Scrabble victory, coupled with his foreshadowing announcement, was just too much for his nerves. He packed his imaginary bags, mentally started a new game against Lottie, and inhaled the non existent scent of his new school, all while his parents moved even closer together on the other side of the island. They both started talking at the same time, then stopped. His father cleared his throat. You go first, Delia, he said. Ben's mother looked into her mug and began. Your father and I have decided it's time to make a move. Are finally following through on those Michigan plans. Can't live this small town life anymore. That's all the things that he's thinking that they're thinking, but in reality, your father and I are getting a divorce. The room swelled and swallowed him, all while he sat on his hands. You Go First by Erin Kelly. Find out more how these two characters from so far away that have such different lives find themselves connected and realize just how much they have in common, and maybe just how much you also have in common with them. Check it out. It is on our Destiny website. Go to Sissy Mess Media Center, click on Destiny, put your email in there and your password, find a great book, check it out, and I will email you when it is time to come and pick it up from the school office. Happy weekend. Enjoy it.